The applause was so loud that no one heard my glass hit the floor. "My youngest son, Daniel," my mother announced from the stage, raising a champagne flute high above her head, "will officially become the new owner and future CEO of Mercer Logistics." More applause. Executives stood. Family members cheered. Daniel grinned, as if he'd spent the last 4 years dragging our company back from bankruptcy, instead of finishing business school. I stayed where I was. My fingers were still wrapped around the gift I'd brought him. Then my mother pointed toward him. "This company is worth nearly $480 million today, because it finally has the right leader." I finally spoke. "What about the software?" The room went silent. "The software that saved this company." My mother looked directly at me, laughed, reached into her purse, and pulled out a folded $50 bill. She pressed it into my palm. "There," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That's all you're worth." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Then she added the sentence I'd remember for the rest of my life. "Your brother has vision. You just write code." No one defended me. Not Daniel. Not the executives who had watched me sleep in conference rooms during product launches. Not the relatives who bragged about the company's success every holiday. I closed my hand around the $50, smiled once, and walked away. Because the only thing more dangerous than someone who has been underestimated is someone they believe they've already defeated. For 3 years, Mercer Logistics had been dying. We had lost major shipping contracts to competitors with faster technology. Warehouse delays were costing millions every quarter. Customers abandoned us because tracking information was unreliable, inventory records constantly failed, and delivery routes were planned using software that belonged in another decade. Banks had started questioning whether the company could survive another year. That's when I came home. I'd turned down offers from 2 international software firms because my mother promised we would rebuild the business together. She said Mercer Logistics wasn't just a company, it was our family's legacy. So I built what no one else could. An integrated logistics platform that connected every warehouse, every delivery truck, every customer portal, every payroll system, and every inventory scanner into a single operating network. Within 12 months, shipping errors dropped dramatically, delivery times improved, clients returned, new investors poured money into the company. Industry magazines called it one of the fastest corporate turnarounds in the logistics sector. My mother accepted every award. Daniel posed for every photograph. I was introduced at banquets as our brilliant IT guy. Standing in the parking lot after the graduation party, I looked back once at the ballroom glowing with celebration. Through the windows, I could still see everyone raising glasses to Daniel's future. No one noticed I was leaving for good. Instead of driving home, I headed to headquarters. The building was nearly empty. The security guard smiled. "Working late again, Ethan?" "For the last time," I answered. He frowned, but I was already walking toward my office. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and removed a small encrypted hardware key no bigger than my thumb. I slipped it into my jacket pocket, logged into my workstation one final time, and sent a carefully prepared email that had been waiting in my drafts for weeks. Then I closed my laptop, placed my company badge beside the keyboard, turned off the office light, and walked out without looking back. As the elevator doors closed, my phone buzzed with a notification confirming my message had been delivered. By Monday morning, Mercer Logistics would discover something my mother had never bothered to ask. Why was the man she just humiliated the only person leaving the building with complete peace of mind? The drive home should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt strangely quiet. The folded $50 bill sat on the passenger seat beside me, untouched. Every time I stopped at a traffic light, I caught myself looking at it. Not because of the money, because my mother had carried it in her purse before the party even began. She hadn't reacted in anger. She had planned the humiliation. When I unlocked my apartment, I didn't turn on the television or pour myself a drink. I walked straight to the fireproof safe, hidden inside my office closet. The keypad beeped. Inside were only a handful of documents. My passport, a few backup drives, and one blue folder labeled *Mercer Logistics, Consulting Agreement ***. I laid it carefully across my desk. For a long moment, I simply stared at my mother's signature. "So you really never read it," I whispered. 3 years earlier, Mercer Logistics had been weeks away from missing payroll. Banks had frozen additional credit. Major customers were leaving every month. Warehouse supervisors still printed schedules because the computer systems crashed almost daily. I had flown home after my mother called me. "Ethan," she'd said over the phone, her voice cracking, "if you don't help us, we're going to lose everything." I believed her. I resigned from a software company that had just offered me a senior architect position. Friends called me crazy. "You'll never get rich working for family." I laughed. It isn't about money. I honestly believed that. For months, I barely slept. I converted an unused conference room into a temporary bedroom. Some mornings, I woke up on a folding cot with a laptop balanced across my chest. Coffee cups surrounded my desk. Whiteboards covered every wall. Routing algorithms. Warehouse automation. Inventory synchronization. Predictive shipment scheduling. Every line of code was written with one goal: keep Mercer Logistics alive. Slowly, everything changed. Lost shipments dropped. Customers stopped complaining. Warehouses began moving faster than they ever had before. Within a year, profits exploded. Industry analysts called the turnaround almost impossible. My mother became the face of that miracle. Whenever reporters visited headquarters, she proudly walked them through the offices. Then she'd point toward me. "That's Ethan." The reporters would smile politely. "Oh, you're the IT manager." Before I could answer, she'd already moved them along. Daniel's rise happened just as quietly. Fresh out of college, he was given a vice president title. He skipped executive meetings, missed deadlines, delegated almost everything. Whenever managers questioned him, my mother stepped in. "He's learning." When I suggested improvements, she replied differently. "Don't overcomplicate things." At first, I thought she was protecting him because he was younger. Then I realized she simply expected more from me because she assumed I'd never leave. One afternoon, after the software had begun transforming the company, I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. We were alone in her office. "I think it's time we discuss equity." She never looked up from her paperwork. "We're family." "I know." "Then why are we talking like lawyers?" "Because this platform is becoming the company's foundation." She sighed dramatically. "You really don't trust your own mother." "It isn't about trust." "It sounds exactly like trust." The conversation ended there. Every time I raised the subject over the following months, she postponed it. After the next quarter, after the investor meeting, after expansion, there'll be plenty for everyone. But later never arrived. Eventually, my attorney gave me advice I couldn't ignore. "If she won't negotiate ownership now," he said, "don't transfer your intellectual property until everything is documented." "I don't want a legal fight." "You don't need one." "So what do I do?" "License the software temporarily." That was the compromise. I drafted a consulting agreement. Mercer Logistics received full operational access to my platform under a commercial license, while ownership discussions continued. The intellectual property remained mine. The license could be terminated under specific conditions, if the consulting relationship ended. I handed the contract to my mother. She flipped through the payment schedule, nodded, signed the final page. She never asked about the licensing clauses, never asked who owned the source code, never even asked why my attorney insisted on that wording. She assumed she already owned everything. My phone suddenly vibrated. Then again. And again. By midnight, there were 8 missed calls. Most came from coworkers. Finally, I answered one. It was Melissa, the operations director. "Ethan, please tell me the rumors aren't true." "What rumors?" "People are saying you resigned." "I did." Silence. Then, "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." "What are we supposed to do Monday?" I looked once more at the signed agreement lying open across my desk. Then I asked softly, "Melissa." "Yeah." Did my mother ever read what she signed? Chapter 1 complete. Hit Geo to continue. # Chapter 2. Monday morning began with confusion. At 7:12 a.m., the first warehouse supervisor called the IT help desk. "My scanners won't connect." The technician rebooted the system. Nothing. 2 minutes later, another call came from the Dallas distribution center. Our loading schedule disappeared. Then Chicago. Then Phoenix. Then Atlanta. Within 15 minutes, every major Mercer logistics facility was reporting the same problem. The software that coordinated the company's entire operation had gone dark. Inside headquarters, employees rushed through the halls carrying laptops and stacks of printed reports. Operations managers crowded around large monitors in the control room. Every dashboard displayed the same message. "License not found. Operational access terminated. Contact software owner." Someone whispered, "This has to be a bug." Another shook his head. "No, this is intentional." Outside the warehouses, trucks sat in long lines waiting for routing instructions that never arrived. Forklift operators couldn't receive inventory assignments. Shipping labels refused to print. Drivers couldn't verify deliveries. The customer service department was overwhelmed before 8 o'clock. My shipment disappeared. "Your website won't let me log in." "Where's my inventory?" Phones rang so constantly that supervisors stopped trying to answer every call. For the first time since the company's turnaround, Mercer Logistics looked exactly like the struggling business it had once been. Daniel arrived wearing a tailored navy suit. Today was supposed to be his first official day as owner. He stepped into the executive lobby smiling. "Morning, everyone." No one answered. Instead, the receptionist looked up with pale eyes. "Mr. Mercer." "What?" "I think you need to go upstairs." His smile faded. When Daniel entered the executive floor, the atmosphere hit him immediately. People weren't celebrating. They were arguing. The chief operating officer slammed a binder onto the conference table. "We've got 200 trucks waiting." The finance director looked up from her laptop. "Payroll processing is frozen." "Our largest client is threatening penalties." "The routing engine isn't responding." Daniel looked around. "Where's Mom?" "In the boardroom." Margaret stood at the head of the table issuing orders. "I want it to restore the system immediately." "The backups won't load," the technology director replied. "Then restore yesterday's version." "We can't." "Why not?" "Because the license won't authenticate." Margaret's voice hardened. "Call Ethan." A nervous silence followed. "He resigned." "I don't care." His phone goes straight to voicemail. She slammed her hand against the table. "This is sabotage." Within the hour, outside attorneys joined the emergency meeting by video conference. Several board members dialed in from different cities. Investors demanded hourly updates. Margaret didn't wait for questions. My oldest son disabled our systems because he's angry about a family disagreement. One director frowned. Do we have evidence? We don't need evidence. Everyone knows he built the software. The company's lead attorney adjusted his glasses. Margaret, before we discuss legal action, I need to clarify something. She folded her arms. What? Who owns the operating platform? She answered without hesitation. The company. You're certain? Of course. He nodded once. Then I'll need the ownership documents. The corporate secretary hurried to the legal archives. Minutes later, she returned carrying several binders. The attorney flipped through employment agreements, vendor contracts, technology records. Then he stopped. What is this? Margaret leaned forward. Our consulting agreement. He continued reading. The room became unusually quiet. Page after page. Clause after clause. Finally, he removed his glasses. When was the last time you reviewed this contract? Margaret frowned. When we signed it. He looked directly at her. I don't believe you did. He projected one page onto the large conference room screen. A highlighted paragraph appeared. The software platform, source code, derivative works, and all associated intellectual property remain the exclusive property of Ethan Mercer. Mercer Logistics receives a revocable commercial license for operational use during the consulting relationship. Nobody spoke. The attorney continued. The company doesn't own the platform. Margaret stared at the screen. That's impossible. It isn't. We paid him. You paid licensing fees. Her expression changed. No. You never purchased the intellectual property. One investor leaned toward his camera. So, if Mr. Mercer terminated the license after resigning. The attorney finished the sentence. Then the company no longer has the legal right to operate the software. Silence filled the room. The realization spread from one face to another. Every warehouse, every customer portal, every routing algorithm, every payroll process, every scanner, everything depended on software the company had never actually owned. Margaret slowly lowered herself into her chair. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I gave Daniel a company that can't operate. No one corrected her. Because no one could. The chairman of the board stood. His expression was calm, but his decision was immediate. We're done assigning blame. He looked around the room before speaking one final sentence. Find Ethan Mercer. We're bringing him into this building immediately. By 10:30 that morning, my phone had rung 23 times. I ignored the first 22. The 23rd came from the chairman of the board. Not my mother. Not Daniel. The chairman. I answered. Ethan. Good morning, Mr. Holloway. His voice was measured. I'd like to ask you to come to headquarters. I resigned. I know. This isn't an employment matter. What is it? It's a governance matter. I glanced at the framed $50 bill, now resting on my desk. I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I walked into Mercer Logistics headquarters, everything felt different. 3 days earlier, I had left through these same glass doors carrying nothing but an encrypted hardware key. Today, the receptionist stood the moment she saw me. Good morning, Mr. Mercer. No one had ever called me that before. The same executives who used to rush past my office now paused to shake my hand. Ethan, thank you for coming. We appreciate your time. The sudden respect wasn't flattering. It was expensive. Mr. Holloway met me outside the executive conference room. I'm sorry about Friday. You weren't there. No. But I heard exactly what happened. He opened the door. Please. Inside, every board member was already seated. My mother sat near the end of the table. She looked as though she hadn't slept. Daniel stared at the polished wood instead of looking at me. For the first time in years, neither of them occupied the head of the room. The company's outside counsel stood first. I'd like the record to reflect that we've completed our preliminary legal review. He turned toward the board. Mr. Mercer has not hacked company systems. He clicked to the next slide. He has not deleted data. Another click. He has not damaged company property. One final click displayed the termination notice I'd emailed Friday night. He exercised a contractual right to terminate a revocable software license following the conclusion of his consulting relationship. The attorney closed the folder. Everything currently happening is legally consistent with the agreement signed by Mercer Logistics. No one argued. There was nothing to argue. The chief operating officer leaned forward. Ethan, could you explain something? I nodded. The software everyone keeps talking about. It isn't one program. He looked confused. What do you mean? It's an ecosystem. I stood and walked toward the display screen. The warehouse scanners communicate with the routing engine. I pointed to another diagram. The routing engine exchanges data with inventory management. Another. Inventory updates customer tracking. Another. Payroll receives labor information from warehouse activity. I looked around the room. If you remove the operating platform, every department loses the ability to communicate. The room was silent. It took me almost 3 years to build. Daniel finally spoke. His voice sounded nothing like it had during the graduation party. I didn't know. Nobody answered. He looked at me. I honestly thought Mom had already made everything fair. I studied him for a second. You never asked. He swallowed. No. You accepted being called the future of the company. I thought. He stopped, then quietly admitted. I thought I earned it. Before anyone could respond, Melissa, the operations director, spoke up. I need to say something. Several board members turned toward her. I wasn't comfortable saying it before. Mr. Holloway nodded. Go ahead. She took a slow breath. There were multiple occasions when department heads recommended giving Ethan equity. Another executive raised his hand. I was in those meetings. So was I, said the finance director. Melissa continued. Every time. Margaret rejected the idea. My mother's eyes closed. Melissa wasn't finished. She always gave the same reason. The room waited. Technical people are replaceable. The sentence landed harder than anyone expected. Because everyone sitting there now knew it wasn't true. The chief financial officer slid a printed report across the table. Our investors have issued a formal notice. Mr. Holloway read it aloud. If operational continuity isn't restored immediately, financing for the expansion project will be suspended. Another board member added. Several institutional investors are considering withdrawing completely. No one needed an explanation. Without financing, Mercer Logistics wouldn't remain a $480 million company for very long. My mother finally looked directly at me. Gone was the confidence from Friday night. Gone was the laughter. Her voice cracked. What do you want, Ethan? Not. What happened? Not. Can we fix this? Just. What do you want? I reached into my briefcase, removed a neatly organized blue folder, and placed it gently in front of her. She instinctively reached for it. I rested my hand on the cover. Not yet. She looked at me. What's in it? My proposal. She tried to open it again. I stopped her once more. You'll read it when everyone is here. Mr. Holloway checked his watch. The remaining directors have just arrived. The conference room doors opened. Board members filed inside. The corporate secretary closed the doors behind them. Mr. Holloway rose from his chair. He looked around the room before speaking. Everyone. He glanced toward the unopened folder resting in front of Margaret. We're ready to vote. The room fell completely silent. No one reached for a phone. No one whispered to a neighbor. Every director's attention settled on the blue folder in front of my mother. Mr. Holloway looked at me. Mr. Mercer, with the board's permission, would you like to explain your proposal yourself? I nodded. I would. Margaret slowly pushed the folder across the table toward me. You should present it. I opened it. There was no dramatic flourish. No hidden trap. Just a professionally prepared business proposal. I know what everyone expects, I began. You think I'm here to take back the company. I looked around the room. I'm not. Several directors exchanged surprised glances. I don't want Mercer Logistics. Daniel looked up for the first time. You don't. I shook my head. No. I clicked to the first page on the conference room screen. Proposal for long-term technology partnership. This company has customers. I clicked again. It has employees. Another slide. It has warehouses. Another. It has relationships that took decades to build. I looked directly at the board. I'm not interested in destroying any of that. The chief financial officer leaned forward. So what are you asking for? I turned to the next page. Permanent commercial licensing of my software. Another page. Recognition that the intellectual property belongs to my company. Another. An independent technology oversight committee that reports directly to the board. Another. Employment protections for engineering staff, so no one else's work can be dismissed the way mine was. The final page appeared. Transparent executive governance requiring board approval before transferring significant ownership interests within the family. I closed the presentation. That's all. One of the independent directors adjusted her glasses. You're not requesting controlling shares. No. A board seat. Only if the board believes my technical expertise is valuable. You're not asking to remove your brother. I looked toward Daniel. No. His shoulders dropped. I don't want revenge. I paused. I want fairness. The company's outside attorney stood. I've reviewed every provision in Mr. Mercer's proposal. He turned toward the directors. These terms are commercially reasonable. He glanced toward Margaret. More importantly, Mr. Mercer is negotiating from a position of complete legal strength. He placed both hands on the conference table. If negotiations fail, the company has no lawful right to continue using his platform. No one challenged his conclusion. They couldn't. The board recessed for 30 minutes. When everyone returned, the chairman remained standing. The board has reached its decision. He looked around the room. We unanimously approve entering into Mr. Mercer's licensing agreement. He turned another page. We further vote to establish an independent governance committee. Another page. And finally, he looked directly at my mother. Effective immediately, Margaret Mercer is removed as Chief Executive Officer, pending her formal resignation. Margaret closed her eyes. For several seconds, she didn't move. Then she quietly removed the company identification badge from her jacket. She placed it on the conference table. I'll submit my resignation today. No one celebrated. It wasn't that kind of victory. After the meeting ended, everyone slowly filed out until only 3 people remained. My mother, Daniel, And me. Margaret looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Just tired. I spent years believing leadership came from confidence, she said softly. I thought people like Daniel inspired others. She looked at me. And people like you would always stay, because you were loyal. I didn't interrupt. I was wrong. She reached into her purse. The same purse she'd carried to Daniel's graduation party. She removed another folded $50 bill. For a second, I thought she had kept a joke ready again. Instead, she unfolded it carefully. It was the matching bill from the same bank withdrawal. I bought these two bills together. She gave a sad smile. I planned to humiliate you. The admission hung in the air. I thought if everyone laughed, you'd stop asking for more. I looked at the bill, then at her. You didn't just underestimate my work. I spoke calmly. You underestimated my willingness to walk away. She nodded. I know. I'm sorry. The words sounded sincere, but they arrived years too late. I accept your apology, I said. But that doesn't rebuild trust. She lowered her head. I understand. Daniel stepped forward. I owe you one too. I waited. I accepted promotions I didn't deserve. He swallowed. I let Mom introduce me as the future of the company. He looked embarrassed. I never asked where the success came from because it benefited me. I extended my hand. Then build something that's actually yours. He stared at my hand before shaking it. I will. The licensing agreement was signed 48 hours later. Within hours of activation, every warehouse came back online. Truck routes reappeared. Customer portals synchronized. Payroll resumed. Shipments began moving again. Employees applauded when the first successful dispatch appeared on the operations dashboard. Not because I had won, because thousands of people still had jobs. That mattered more than any title. Over the following months, Mercer Logistics stabilized under new leadership appointed by the board. The company remained a client of my new software firm under a long-term commercial agreement. This time, every contract was read. Every clause was understood. Every contribution was documented. No assumptions. No favoritism. Only accountability. Former clients, who had always believed Mercer Logistics created the platform, began contacting me directly. Word spread quickly throughout the industry. Conference organizers invited me to speak about enterprise logistics, software architecture, and intellectual property. Young engineers often asked the same question after my presentations. Weren't you angry? I always smiled. For a while. Then I'd hold up a framed $50 bill hanging in my office. I kept this because it reminds me that someone else's opinion never determines your value. Nearly a year later, I visited Mercer Logistics again. Not as an employee. Not as an overlooked son. As the founder and CEO of the software company that powered their success. As I walked through the lobby, employees stopped me to shake my hand. One warehouse supervisor smiled. Thanks for saving all our jobs. I smiled back. All I did was make sure the right people finally understood what they were depending on. When I stepped back outside, I looked once at the building where I'd spent years trying to earn approval that was never going to come. Then I got into my car and drove toward a future I had built myself. The company survived because of the software I created. But the greatest thing I ever built was a life where no one else got to decide what I was worth.